Hey guys, good afternoon. It's Denise with Lazy Mountain Homestead. Well, today I've decided I'm going to try another cake mix hack recipe. And this is going to use a white cake mix. And guess what we're going to make? Cinnamon rolls. So I'm really excited about that because I thought, well, this sounds interesting and we love cinnamon rolls. And Willis is home, so he'll be my taste tester, won't you?
Yeah.
So we do need yeast. So you're going to have that yeast flavor like you normally would with cinnamon rolls. So let's get started. I'm going to, the first part here we're going to do is blooming the yeast and then making the dough. And then we have to let it rise double or 30 minutes it says. So we'll see. My house is a little chilly, so it might take a little bit longer. So let me put this tripod down, show you what we're doing. I've got 2.5 cups of warm water. Now, when I'm blooming yeast, I usually like it to be anywhere from 135 Fahrenheit to 140 because I found out with making breads and stuff and blooming your yeast, that's right about the correct temperature. And that's pretty warm, kind of like if you shake a bottle out on your wrist for a baby's bottle, about 135. So that's perfect. I've got 3 packets of active dry yeast, and it does call for 3 packets, so I'm just going to go ahead and put these in here one at a time, or 3 at a time, I guess I should say. There you go. I think I cut them all so they'd all go in there. Make sure that the middle one wasn't cut yet though. There we go. Okay, so three packets of yeast in here. Now, what I'm going to do and what I usually do when I'm blooming yeast, I usually add a teeny bit of honey, and that's just because yeast really thrives on sweet, something sweet to bloom right. So I'm just going to add probably a teaspoon, just a teaspoon of our honey from our bees. And I'm just mixing it around, and I'm just using my thermometer like so. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and let this bloom. Now, you can put a tea towel over it and keep the warm. Let me see if I've got one. No, but I've got one. I'll just put that over it, and that'll help it bloom because it does need the heat. We'll set that aside. Okay, and then what we're going to need in the meantime, the recipe calls for 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And that's all-purpose here in the States. And I use white lily. I don't know what they call it in Europe, but I know it's something different than all-purpose. And I sift it with my sifter because I like to make sure that all of the flour is nice and fluffy. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to wait for this to bloom. Then we're going to mix the entire cake mix and 3 cups of this flour. And once we do that, we're going to mix it together just like a dough. And it's going to be elastic because it's going to have the yeast, and we're going to knead it for 8 minutes. So I'll be back as soon as that yeast is ready to go, about 10 minutes, and we'll continue. Okay, we are back. Let me show you what this yeast looks like. It's all nice and puffed up. You see, that's what you want. That's called blooming yeast. So what we're going to do first is we're going to put 3 cups of this sifted all-purpose flour in our bowl. And if you hear any noise in the background, it's Willis. He's cooking because he's got to go back out on the road tomorrow. So we're both utilizing the kitchen. And now we're going to put the whole contents of the white cake mix. And we use Betty Crocker, like you guys know. We feel like that's the best, don't we, Willis?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to take this whisk and I'm just going to gently mix it around just so all of that's nice and combined. And if there's any little lumps or bumps in there, it's all nice and mixed together. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour in my yeast mixture. All right, and I'm just going to kind of stir that around with this dough whisk. Now, if you guys have never seen one of these, they're called Danish dough whisks, and I just love it. I use it anytime I'm making bread or any of these cake mix recipes. I just feel like it really mixes it all together well. Okay, now I kind of got that together there. Now what I'm going to do, I've got the other cup and a half of flour. Now you may not use all of this according to the recipe, but what you're going to do is add a half a cup at a time, just to make sure that you don't use too much, because if I poured that whole cup and a half in here, it might be too much for the liquid. So, and what we're looking for is a nice firm dough, just like if you ever made yeast rolls, you know, like dinner rolls or something. So you don't want too much flour, because then it would be really yucky. All right, so that was a whole cup. There's another half cup. You see how it's becoming elastic there? Okay. I'll go ahead and add some more. And you do this when you're making bread too. When I'm making my sourdough bread, I always have the flour to the side so I can add it as needed to make a nice dough, because you can see it's still pretty wet and you want it to be a little bit dry. Okay, so it's still a little bit wet, as you can see. So I'm going to add another half cup, maybe just a scant less than a half cup. And I think this probably do it. You see how stiff it's becoming? There you go. Yeah, that's what you want. And I'm mixing it. You're not wasting any flour. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but man, the price of flour, even going to Walmart, is crazy. It's like $4.44 now, and it used to be not even 2 years ago. Not even, well, I have to say 3 years ago, because the pandemic is what screwed it up. It was like $2 and something. Then you couldn't even find bread flour. And it was so funny because everybody started making sourdough because you couldn't get yeast. And I'd always been making sourdough, always been making bread. Okay, so what I did was I went ahead and I just floured my surface here. You want to make sure you have a lightly floured surface. And you're going to turn this dough out. Let me get a spatula here. I've just got a little bit that's sitting in there that I want to get out. And you're just going to plop that right on here. Now you're going to use this bowl because you're going to use the same bowl to let it rise in. And we'll be adding some oil in that. Now I'm going to lightly flour my hands. Okay? And we'll get this into a nice dough. It's a very soft, now I've never made this before, and you guys know whenever I make my recipes, I always am making them first time with you, unless it's a recipe that was like a family recipe. But these kind of things, I like to just go with you on my channel so you can kind of see if I make a mistake, because nothing is perfect. Not in my world anyways. And I don't think it's in anybody's world that things are perfect. Okay, you see I'm adding flour as I go, because I still think it's just a little bit soft. But I'll tell you, a cinnamon roll dough is a soft yeast dough. So, okay, I think that's pretty good. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to knead this for about 8 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and knead it, and then I'll be back. Okay, guys, it's been 8 minutes. Now, I will tell you, I did have to add some more flour to this because I want it to be a nice, firm dough. I mean, it's going to be soft, but you don't want it to where it's a bunch of gook, you know, like a cake mix would be. So I probably added a little at a time. So I'd say I added probably another half cup while I was kneading it the whole time. Okay, so now you've got this nice dough here. And let me see where Willis put my, well, I'll just, hold on, let me walk around the table. I have to get my oil. With both of us cooking, we're taking each other's stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do in the bowl that I said I was going to use, I use this to get everything together. Just pour some oil in there, probably 2 to 3 tablespoons. And what we're going to do is just kind of roll it around like that. Roll it around onto the sides. And what this is going to do is just ensure that your dough doesn't stick. So you want to make sure it's up on your sides. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just pop the dough, and then I'm just going to turn it over so that bottom side is up, and that is the oil side. So we're going to go ahead and let this rise for 30 minutes or until doubled. I'm going to lightly cover it with some saran wrap and a tea towel. Now, if you don't have the saran wrap, you can use a damp tea towel. It's up to you. But that is what we're going to do. So we'll see you in about 30 minutes. Okay, guys, I'm back. So we've got our dough, and it has risen. It's doubled, and it was just about 30 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off my tea towel, and you can see how big it's gotten. And it really smells good. Very happy with it. So what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and punch it down. You want to get the gas out of it. And I'm going to go ahead and put it back on this surface here. Lightly floured surface. I don't want to brown my surface. Then I would be on fire, wouldn't I, Willis? And we're just going to go ahead and dump that right out there. Let me go ahead and put this here so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. My tripod's acting kind of crazy today. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit of flour on here because it is a really sticky dough. So I just want to forewarn you guys there. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to make sure it's nice and floured. Because I'm afraid it's going to be a little sticky. But, you know, like I said earlier, a cinnamon roll dough is a sticky dough. My mom used to make these when I was little, real little. And she would always let it rise in the bedroom that I was taking a nap in. I always felt so special. Okay, so what I did was I just, with my hands, I just kind of rolled it out or patted it out to a rectangle. Because you want it to be as even as possible. Okay, and that is probably maybe a little less than a ½ inch. Okay, so what we want to do next, we're going to take softened butter. I have about a ½ stick here. And like I said, my house is cold, so this is a little cold. So I'm going to just kind of soften it in my hands like so. It might seem gross, but you have to use your hands for this. And we're just going to go ahead and spread this butter all on your dough here that you have patted out to your rectangle. And you want to go all the way to the edges, because this is going to hold your cinnamon sugar, which is our next step. Now, guys, if you want to use nuts in this or raisins, it's up to you. I am not using raisins, but I am going to use pecans, but not in this. I'm going strictly by this recipe this time. Okay. Go ahead and wipe my hands off for the butter. Okay, now what we've got to put in the middle here, I have about 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar and 1 tablespoon and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. There you go. You can see that. I have kind of a shadow for some reason. Now, as you guys have probably known from my videos, I'm still crazy about cardamom. So I'm going to just do a couple shakes of cardamom because I just love that spice. And I'm just going to mix it in there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to take this brown sugar, cinnamon mixture, and we are just going to take our hand and we are going to sprinkle it all along the buttered dough. And you want to be generous because this is what makes your cinnamon roll so good. If you're skimpy on this, it's just going to taste like a roll. So, and then I just, with my hand, lightly go and just make sure it's all nice and even, and I like it to be all the way to the edge. All right. So this next step, you're going to roll this into a log. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start here. And you kind of have to just work it. Okay? And you want to tuck. See how I'm tucking? Because you want it to have that cinnamon roll circle or swirl, whatever you're wanting to call it. So when you see as I'm rolling, I'm tucking with my thumbs. I'm tucking. And you just keep doing this until you get to the edge. And you want to make sure that you're doing it as even as possible so you don't go kind of wonky to one side. Sometimes it will. And I just stretched this a little bit, as you can see. And the good thing about a dough like this that's got yeast in it is you can stretch it. Gently stretch it. Okay. And I am just trying to get this as even. Now, I don't know if you guys can see, I've got about 1 inch here. And I'm just going to roll it over, tucking as I go, tucking. Okay, and then I'm just taking my thumbs and making sure it's all even. Okay, so there is your cinnamon roll log. All right, let me get a really sharp knife. Hopefully I have a really sharp knife. Okay, so what we're going to do now, maybe clean up just a tad here. I thought I was going to have to use my thing to roll it, but it did really well with just my hands. Okay, and you can see it's starting to rise. Now, let me bring my pan over here, and I'm just using a cookie sheet. This is a pretty big size cookie sheet. I don't know the size of it, but it's large. And I have parchment paper in the bottom of it. Okay, what I'm going to do is, let's see, cut these as even as possible. So what I do is I take my knife and kind of go and give myself a little bit of a sheet so I can see what I'm going to get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 10. That one might be a little bit big, but so I'll just make that a little bit smaller. Okay, so I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to cut these. Now this is a serrated edge knife. Okay. So this is kind of this recipe is a little bit different than I would normally do. You're going to have some melted butter, and you're going to brush it on here, and then you're going to put some pecans and sugar on top. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on there. Make sure now when you lift this off that you are all tucked and pinched so they don't come apart. Okay. That's the dough. Okay. Okay. All right. And if you're worried about it, I would put it, you can pinch it right there like I'm doing. And put the dough, the open end of the dough next to one of your rolls. That way when they rise, because we're going to let them rise again for another half hour, they don't come apart. Okay. Wow, they're really getting big. This is really rising fast. So, yeah. Willis just asked if I was still doing the video. I said, yes. This is the most important part. All right, so pinching that little end, and you can see this in the swirl part there. I think they're going to be good, guys. Like I said, this first time I've made these with the cake mix. And I haven't made cinnamon rolls probably for a year. I like to make them around the holidays. I like to make them for Christmas morning breakfast because I think they're really...
Oh, that was really good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now the last one, I think I'm going to cut the end off here because he really sealed at the bottom there. And I'm just going to tuck that right there. Okay, so you guys can see. Aren't they pretty? Okay. So what I'm going to do next, and like I said, this is with this recipe. I usually don't do this, but it sounded so good I thought I would. Let me get my melted butter, and I have one of these brushes, and I've got my melted butter in here, and that was a half a stick of melted butter. And now in the recipe it says you can either dunk them or you can brush them, and I am going to brush because I don't trust them staying together if I were to dunk them in this. But if you guys do and you find that dunking works for you, let me know in the comments. I'd really like to know. I think I'm just a scaredy cat that they would fall apart. But they smell so, so good. And I'm just going to go back and kind of give the ones that I think need a little bit more melted butter. I mean, you can't go wrong with melted butter. No way. So good. And if you see any little dry patches of flour or something, just put that melted butter on there too, because that'll definitely help. Okay, and I've got my oven preheated. Ouch. I just realized that there was steam coming out of some green beans. Anyway, preheated at 375. So what we're going to do next is I've got a half a cup of white sugar. No, you can't eat it, Willis. And then I've got some pecans, and I put these in the food processor and I ground them up really well. And I'm just going to use my hands like so and get that into kind of maybe a streusel-y type thing. That's all it is pecans and sugar. Okay, and what it says is you just generously put that on the top of each one of these rolls. Now, these are pretty big, these rolls, so maybe they'll be like that Cinnabon. Willis brings those home sometimes and surprises me from the road. He gets them at, what, did you get them at the Pilot?
What?
The Cinnabons?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're good. Okay, guys, so what we're going to do is go ahead and cover this. with my tea towel, and I am going to let it rise for another 30 minutes or until they are doubled in size, which they're going to be huge, aren't they? I don't think that's going to be quite big enough. Okay. But I'm going to watch them, and like I said, I'll let you know if it was 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but I want to make sure that they're nicely risen. Okay, you see they're already starting. So we'll be back as soon as I think that they're ready. And remember, preheat your oven at 375. Okay, guys, it's been 30 minutes. I checked it at 20 minutes, and Willis and I both said, well, we'll go 10 more minutes and see. So they didn't go crazy. So I wanted to put this down so you can see it. Look how beautiful they are. Aren't they pretty? So I'm going to take the plastic off, and I'm going to go ahead and stick them in the oven at 375 for 20 minutes or until golden brown. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I can't wait to see how these turn out. This has really been a fun video. So we'll see how that turns out. I hope they're really tasty. And I'm going to make a just a confectioner powdered sugar glaze to go over, because I like that on my cinnamon rolls. It's not in the recipe, which I'm surprised, but I'm going to go ahead and do that at the end when they are slightly cold. So we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Okay, guys, 30 minutes, well, 20 minutes later, in the oven. Look at these. Oh my gosh, aren't they huge? Willis, look at them.
I see them.
They are absolutely gorgeous. Oh man.
We're here all by ourselves. What are we going to do about that?
I don't know. I guess we'll be sending them to your job tomorrow with you. Oh man, guys, this is, well, next will be the taste test for sure. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let these cool for, well, at least 10 minutes before I go ahead and make up the icing. And all I'm going to do is use a cup of powdered sugar and some half and half. And I'm just going to make it into a nice glaze and just kind of go across there. And I'll show you that when I come back in about 10 to 15 minutes. But man, am I really impressed with this recipe. Aren't you?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, we'll see you in a few. Okay, guys, I've got them pretty cool. We took a little walk in the woods so we could put a chip back in one of our game cameras. And I thought, well, that's perfect because I won't be worrying about these cooling because I really want to try them. The smell is amazing. You have to try this recipe, which the recipe and directions will be in the description box. I think I'm starting to drool. Oh my gosh. They smell so good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is get a fork here. I've got a cup of powdered sugar. And I'm going to probably, let me see if I can move these up here a little bit. Cup of powdered sugar. I've got some half and half here, and I'm just going to shake it. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour maybe, you know, you don't need a lot of moisture when you're working with powdered sugar. So maybe a tablespoon right now, because I want this to be pretty thick. You know how it is when you get a cinnamon roll from a bakery. All right, I'm going to add maybe a teaspoon more. I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I'm not putting any vanilla in it because I'm using half and half, and that has heavy cream in it, and it does give a really nice flavor. Now, if you want to put vanilla, you're more than welcome. There we go. Probably a half a teaspoon there. Just mixing it up really well. Yeah. There we go. Maybe a teeny tiny bit more. Now I'm not putting a ton of this frosting or glaze over this because it does have the sugar already on it and it's got the nuts and the butter. Okay, let me see, put that down a little bit there. All right. Yeah, I think, let me show you. I think this is about perfect for me. If you want it a little bit thicker or thinner, you guys can kind of do it accordingly. But that's pretty easy. And if it's too thin, you can always add more powdered sugar. But I'll tell you the truth, it's easier to start all over again if you can. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start down one end, and I'm just going to come across, just kind of going like this. There we go. Wow. That's really looks good. As soon as Willis comes back in, he just went outside to do something with the dogs. I'm going to have him be our taste tester and see what he thinks. Wow, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Wow. I am thoroughly impressed so far with this recipe. So I'll be back in a few minutes. This is here. I wanted to show you the height. Look at the height on that. Isn't that beautiful? You have to try these. Okay, here's the taste tester.
Oh, wow.
Are they good?
Oh, man. Them are good.
Best ever?
Best ever.
Well, I hope you guys will give it a try. Like I said, recipe will be in the description, and it's a cake mix hack. Y'all have a great night from Lazy K Mountain Homestead. See you soon. Bye.